This is the One Girl Revolution podcast, a podcast that highlights the stories of world-changing women and girls across the country. We hope that these stories inspire you, but even more so, we hope that these stories help you to see your own value, your purpose, and your power to change the world through your life. Every woman and girl is a One Girl Revolution. Welcome to the One Girl Revolution podcast. It's your girl Kate here, and I am so excited for you to hear this week's powerful episode. Today we are joined by an extraordinary woman, a change maker, a visionary, and a relentless advocate for our nation's most vulnerable children, Darcy Olsen. Darcy is the founder of the Center for the Rights of Abused Children, a national nonprofit organization that's rewriting the story for children who have experienced abuse, abandonment, and neglect. The center believes something very simple yet profound, that every child deserves a safe, loving family and a bright future. But the reality is heartbreaking. Every year, 600,000 children in America are abused. Right now, 100,000 children are waiting to be adopted in the U.S. foster care system. And more than 23,000 young people age out of the foster care system every single year, often left alone in this world without a family, without a support system, and without the resources they need to thrive. These are children who have suffered trauma or neglect, or both. Children who have had their voices silenced, and children who have been failed by the systems we have in place, and they need us to advocate for them. Now, we don't often talk about politics or policy on this podcast, but this is a critical topic that I think we can all agree needs to change in our world. This is an issue, this is a topic that we can all get around. This is not about sides or labels, it's about children. It's about doing what's right and protecting the most innocent among us. This is a topic that we should all be able to come together on and rally around. And that's exactly what Darcy is doing. Through her work at the Center for the Rights of Abused Children, Darcy and her team are fighting every single day to ensure that abused and abandoned children don't just survive, but that they have the right to thrive. They provide free legal aid and policy advocacy to protect children's rights. They work to keep siblings together, prevent homelessness, protect trafficking victims, and ensure that every child has the opportunity to grow up in a safe and loving home. They've worked on more than 1,200 cases on behalf of children, and they're pushing forward legislation and legal reforms that are transforming lives. Their work is changing hearts, minds, and laws, and giving children a future filled with hope. And Darcy doesn't just lead this movement from behind a desk. She lives it. As you'll hear in this episode, she has personally fostered 10 children and adopted 4 of them. Her home, her heart, and her life are devoted to these children. And her story is proof of what one person can do when they refuse to look away and they choose to make a difference. In this episode, Darcy shares her own powerful journey from being a foster mom to becoming a national advocate, and the stories that fuel her passion every single day. Darcy opens up about the heartbreaking realities of children in the foster care system, the urgent need for reform, and the incredible power of just one person, one voice to make a difference. Whether you're a parent, a social worker, a teacher, or someone who just cares about children and wants to make a difference, this episode will move you, challenge you, and inspire you to be a part of the solution. Every child deserves to be seen, heard, protected, and loved. So let's dive in. Here's my conversation with Darcy. Darcy, welcome to the One Girl Revolution podcast.
Thank you. It's so great to be on.
It's so great to meet you. It's like funny when I think about the story of how you and I got connected, which was pretty recent. You were with our mutual friend, Catherine Lopez, and she posted a picture of the two of you on Facebook. And immediately I was like, I need to look up who Darcy is and what she's doing. And the second that I started reading about your incredible work. I was like, I have to have Darcy on the podcast to talk about it. And I think it's so important, especially in this day and age, for us to be having this conversation. And so I'm so grateful to have you on, and I can't wait to highlight the great work that you're doing. But before we get into that, I would love to rewind and hear a little bit about your own story, your own life, and your life before the center started.
Okay, well, thank you so much. And first of all, I'm inspired by you. Your entrepreneurship, the idea of One Girl Revolution is just amazing. And so it was an honor to be invited and included. And I just can't wait to watch you and your podcast and all the things you're doing unfold over the next couple of years. It's just very cool.
Thanks, Darcy.
So to your question of what was I doing before the Center for the Rights of Abused Children, it's I've got a lot of stories, but right before that, I had been running a place called the Goldwater Institute, and I had sort of taken it was in the red when I took over in my 20s, and I had a board of like 100 men, and just one of those classic stories of just, not knowing what you don't know, but going in anyway. And I had just finished writing a book called The Right to Try, which it became a federal law and gives patients with terminal illnesses the right to try investigative medicines when they're terminal to try to save their lives. And I had long been in public policy, but I kind of had one of those moments when I was doing a radio show talking about people with terminal illnesses and like this whole generation that was going to be lost. And I thought, this is the aspect of the freedom movement that I love the most, which is how can we protect life, enrich life, and move barriers out of the way for families and people.
I know that there's a really powerful story for how the center started. Maybe you could start by just talking about your own spark moment that brought about this idea.
Yes. So while I was doing that work, Kate, I felt inspired, and that's the only way I can put it. I felt inspired to become a foster parent. And I was single, and I had always envisioned my life in a very traditional way. I was going to get, engaged and married and have children. And I like that traditional vision. So I thought when I felt this inspiration that I could take in a teenager. And I thought that children in foster care were basically juvenile delinquents who just needed someone understanding to take them in. And I thought, well, I can do that. And so I thought this kind of calling makes sense to me. So I went in and I got all signed up, and I talked to the licensing worker, and she said, can you take a baby? And I said, what? Because like most people, I thought babies were in high demand. Everybody wanted babies. And the first thing I said was, don't you have any like families to take in babies? Because I'm running an organization and I'm single. And she said, the drug epidemic is so bad across the United States right now that we have infants living in office buildings and in shelters downtown. So if you could please open a crib, we'd be grateful. So I said, all right. I called my best friend. We went to Target. We built a crib. And that is the beginning of this story and how you and I met.
So talk about that. So you buy this crib, you have this baby, and I just like, what's the connecting point, or was there a spark moment to then start the Center for Abused Children? There obviously is.
Yes, yes. So I this first baby, I go into the hospital to pick her up. And the only thing I know about her is she spent her first 3 weeks of life on a morphine drip. And, so really, I'm going in and I'm praying that, I'm praying for her mother, wondering where the mother is, and I'm praying for this baby. And I'm also praying that I'm going to be enough because I'm the one who's showing up. And, there were people who criticized the single mothering. And I thought to myself, gosh, isn't it better that a child have at least one parent than no parent? It's a little different than going out and just like making a child. So I bring her home. And when you talk about the inflection point and when I knew that we had to do something, it was just 3 or 4 months in. and I'm going monthly to court for the baby. That's pretty standard across the country when in an abuse proceeding. And I realized very quickly that the perpetrators, usually a parent or a caretaker, they have state appointed free attorneys representing their interests, and the state had multiple attorneys representing their interests so they don't get sued. The judge had a guardian ad litem to help him make decisions, and the abused child had no one, Kate, no one. And I am not an attorney, but I grew up reciting the Pledge of Allegiance, and I believe in equality and justice for all. And I knew something was very, very wrong. And so the first thing I did was look at my bank account and figure out how I could get an attorney in the courtroom for this child. Because I know that without an attorney, rights don't mean anything. Because if they're not brought to the judge, they basically don't exist. So I did that, and then I end up fostering 10 total, just one after another, after another, after another, and all of these experiences. And during the course of that, I thought to myself, it is it's a game of Russian roulette for these children. And I knew that I had the public policy reform experience that it would take to change the laws. I knew what laws needed to be changed. And so even though I was in my 40s with 3 adopted kids and a foster baby in my arms without any extra money, I decided that we needed an organization to fight for the constitutional rights of abused children. And so, again, I took the leap and I just did it.
I love so many facets of your story. One, I just love that even as a single woman, you were like, I just want to do this. Like, I'm going to go. And I think a lot of times people get scared of the foster care system or scared to do something outside of the normal realm. It's like, oh, I'll wait until I find the right person to be with. Then maybe I'll think about doing foster care, or maybe I'll think about adoption. And it's like, no, just do it. There's so many little children out there. And like you said, babies, all different ages, kids that just need someone, that needs someone to advocate for them. And we can all do it. I have a dear friend here in Michigan who has 3 little kids, and she recently just started fostering a little girl. And like this little girl, she has 3 boys, and this little girl is like this beacon of light in their family. And who knows how that story is going to play out, but I just have so much respect for her and for anyone like you that's like, let me just open up my heart. And it's obviously difficult because you're seeing the abuse, you're seeing the difficult things that these kids have already, traumatic things that these kids have already gone through from a very young age. But if you don't advocate for them, who will? And I think that we need to all do something. We can all do something. And you're doing it on a big scale with the center now, advocating for children, advocating for families. I know there are multiple facets to the work that you're doing, but it all started with that yes. It started with your willingness to just put one foot in front of the other and see how it all played out.
Kate, I love that. And I think, sometimes people will be like, oh, you're just like, you must be such a saint, or, what an incredible mom you are. And I am not a saint. I'm a good mom. I mean, I'm the best mom I can be, like any mom. I have mom guilt and there are things I don't do right, but what I did do is I showed up, and that's it. And I would say to people, around the 4th or 5th baby that I took in, someone said, I can see why you would do 1 or 2 or 3, but like, this is kind of getting crazy now. And I said, okay, I can see why you feel that way. But if you walked out your front door and there was an abandoned baby on your doorstep in a basket, what would you do? These children cannot make their way to us. We have to go to them. And that's why I did it. And I stopped at 10 because that was all that I could personally do. 4 adoptions, 6 had other stories. That was my limit. Everybody is different. But yeah, I mean, I showed up, and that's what it takes. And I think a big part of the challenge right now and the need is that people, when you look at the polls, think that foster care is full of juvenile delinquents. Most people don't even know that this is actually where children who have been harmed, sexually abused, who can't find relatives in general to live with even, they end up, right? They end up in this system. They are innocent victims and they are suffering. And we are short families across the country. So for every 2 kids going in, there's 1 bed. So I know a kid down here locally who is 12, who comes over every couple of weeks to play with my group of kids because 3 of them are about that age. And he's been in a shelter with his 3 other siblings for over 2 years. And I'm thinking, what is the first day of school like? And I'm obviously not going to say his name, but I'm like, do you need back to school clothes? What about your siblings? What does your lunch look like? I mean, and I think we just don't know. And then the second part, of course, there are fears, but what I tell people is, a lot of those fears are true, right? It's hard. It is hard to watch a child leave and go into a potentially dangerous situation. But you know who it's harder for? The child. And is it a pain to deal with the bureaucracy? It's awful. I hated having bureaucrats in my home all the time. I was up to my ears in meetings and we were not treated well. But you know who's really not treated well? You know who that bureaucracy is really tough on? Children. So I think if we could set aside a little bit of our selfishness and think about the tremendous need that's out there, we could fill that gap. We could have more than enough families for these children. And that is a first step toward fixing the absolute brokenness and invisible crisis across the country.
Yeah, life isn't easy in general, right? I think all of us feel like we are constantly drinking through a fire hose in all things, but if we could just carve out a little space, dig deep and like find a little bit of space to either foster a child or just advocate for them. I mean, sometimes like even you telling the story about your children's little friend, and it's like, we all know kids that maybe they're not even in the foster care system, but they might be struggling with something, or their family might be struggling to pay bills. I think about that when I have different people on this podcast. Like, we need to open our eyes to things that are happening in our own communities and look for people. Not that we have to be Mother Teresa every single day. I'm not asking people to quit their jobs and dedicate their life to this, but we all can give a little bit more and push ourselves a little bit more.
I love that. And I think, Kate, in this day and age, 25 years ago, people would just call their legislator, or they do a little volunteer thing. And the reality is that the world has gotten much bigger. We have many, many more people with these problems, right? With drug addiction, many more homeless, many more with mentally ill. And so my personal feeling is, if there's a cause that you believe in, I love animals. I don't want to see animals killed, right? So my modest little donations go to places like the Humane Society, right? Or the local no-kill shelter. And then there are a couple of schools that I can do a little bit for, right? Or maybe I can fundraise for them. But in general, if there's something you believe in, it really takes an organization to fix the legislation, to fix the laws, which we do. And of course, we show up every day in court for kids too. We have a pro bono law clinic for the children who don't have attorneys. But it's kind of, it's a romantic notion that we're going to make a big difference through I just shared this, or I just the reality is, in this world, you got to step up. You've got to open your home. You've got to support the organizations that are in this fight. You've got to do more than chit chat. And that is a hard reality, but that's honest. And so when people are like, just like this, just like our page, I'm like, liking that page isn't going to save a kid's life today. But you know what might? Getting an attorney in the courtroom to fight for that kid. And we've had kids who have, I'm not kidding you, Kate, been returned to sexual abusers 5 times in a row. If these children don't have attorneys and the predators do, who do you think wins in court?
Yes.
This is not complicated. Predators have more rights than the kids that they prey on. And until that is leveled out, children will be second-class citizens. They will suffer and they will die at the hands of these people. And so we have to get after it, and we have to get after it in big and bold ways.
Yes, exactly. And it just takes one. We here at One Girl Revolution believe that every single woman and girl is a one girl revolution, right? That we can make a difference. And I see that. I see that in you and the work that you're doing. And I know other women and girls that are involved in the center and the great work that you're doing. I also am thinking about my friend Erica Hamill, who I've had on this podcast. We actually became friends. I had her on the podcast, and her sweet son Wyatt was shaken by her ex-husband's ex-girlfriend, and she ended up going to prison for some time, not long enough. And anyways, Erica was like, I need to not only protect my baby from anything ever happening to him again. Wyatt's a little beacon of light. He's now, I think, 11 or 12. But she ended up pushing forward a law in Michigan called Wyatt's Law. And it was the first child abuse registry in the state of Michigan. And I think about her, and I think about the work that you're doing. We can all do something, and it doesn't have to be founding some big nonprofit, or it's great if you have a big dream and a plan, but it's like, start with one thing and put one foot in front of the other and just do what you can do. Like, I love also your honesty about like, hey, this is what I could do, and this is where I drew the line, and this is it. And like, I think that all of us need to do that. Like, hey, can I do a little bit more? And like, push yourself until you can't. And then it's like, nope, I need to draw a boundary and not do that. Every day, women and girls are changing the world, lifting up their communities and making a difference. At One Girl Revolution, we are dedicated to highlighting the stories of world-changing women and girls to inspire the world. But we can't do it alone. This year, we're celebrating 6 years of telling these world-changing stories, and we need your help to keep it going. Become a monthly donor by giving just $6 a month in honor of our anniversary. Every single dollar fuels our mission, keeping the podcast going, expanding our reach, and making sure these voices and these stories are heard far and wide. If you believe in the power of women's voices and their stories, if you want to be a part of the revolution, donate today. Go to onegirlrevolution.com/donate and be a part of the revolution.
One of my favorite people in this world is Ben Stein. And I think most people now know him as a comedian. And I grew up in an era where he was like the principal in Ferris Bueller's Day Off. But he spoke at an event for us when I was running the Goldwater Institute. And what he said has just really stuck with me, which is that as he went through his life, he realized, there's always going to be somebody smarter. There's always going to be somebody funnier. There was always going to be somebody who was wealthier. And he said, but when my father was dying, I realized that nobody could be a better son to my father than I could. And nobody could be a better father to my son than me, right? Than me. And so I think for anybody listening in our own worlds, right? Like, I'm in the activism world, right? I'm in public policy. I was born to make change for these kids. That's great. That's for me. That's my calling. But all of us, no matter where you're, that might not be your thing, but you can be the best neighbor, right? You can be the best sister. You could be the best friend to somebody, the best, daughter. And I think that's so underrated, the importance and value of that one friendship or that one call to your mom or to your dad. And all of us can do that. So I walked away with that from Ben Stein. And so as much as I try to do for the all of the children who are not mine, I always remember at the end, that my priority at the end of the day are these 4 children I'm raising. And if I don't get that right, then I don't, nothing is worth anything. Nothing will make up for that failure in the home and those relationships. So I also, in speaking, and as much as I want to inspire people to like go big and go bold, I also want to inspire people to like sort of root down and bear down and just like, and to really lift up the relationships with the people that you do have, because only you can be that person to those people. And we don't talk enough about that. And it's super, super important. And everybody has tremendous worth in that place.
Yeah, it's so important for us to just recognize people in our own families, in our own communities, and like, what are the little things that we can do? And even my parents never ended up doing foster care, but we had a family member that had a baby, and she was just kind of going through some difficulties. And I think I was maybe 10 years old, and our little cousin came and stayed with us for a while, and she was our little like sweet baby pet. Like we loved her and took care of her, and my parents were like, that's what we can do. Like she stayed with us, maybe 6 months, and then her mom was able to get her life back on track, and then she went back with her mom. But we can all do those little things, and sometimes it's that little reprieve, right? It's that moment where somebody's going through a difficult time, like, hey, let me take your baby for you, or let me hold your baby while you're like, eating your meal. It's like these little things in our lives that can make such an impact, but also people can do big things too. And that's why I want to talk about. So let's talk about the Center for the Rights of Abused Children. I know you kind of talked a little bit about the work that you do, but for people that are listening, what is the mission of the center, and talk about all the facets of the work that you do?
Sure. I mean, the mission is to change the laws in order that every child can grow up safe and loved. It's that simple. We just believe every child deserves a safe and loving home. And so we're doing, we're fighting the big fights, I would say, on behalf of children. So we are working to get a case up to the United States Supreme Court one day that will affirm the right of innocent child victims to have attorneys in their court proceedings. All criminals have that constitutional right because their lives and liberty interests are on the line. And nowhere is that more the case than in these proceedings for children who have been so terribly abused and who are completely alone. So that's a big picture fight. But on a day-to-day basis, we also run a pro bono children's law clinic. So for these children who have been hurt and are living in the system, and some can go to families like your little cousin that you talked about, and that's always ideal. But many, 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 about 250,000 a year won't have relatives that they can go to. And they will need foster families, and they need laws that protect them while they're in limbo between families, essentially. And so for those children who don't have attorneys, which that's like 90% of children across the United States, we have a law clinic, and we represent them in court day in and day out, and we're building a national referral network so that we can serve more children in other states as well until we can get those laws to change. I'll give you an example of just a few of the laws we've passed. One law in my state, my home state of Arizona, now every single child in our state who comes into the foster care system gets an attorney from the beginning to the end of their case. Those kids get out of the system 3 times faster, they're safer, and it's just justice. I mean, this makes sense to people, right? People are like, wait, what? They don't have anyone to, and you're like, no, they don't. So that was just one. We had another one that was so simple. So about half of these kiddos have special education needs, either from sometimes it's drug exposure in utero, and sometimes it's just they've been moved around so many times that they're that behind. And we found out that thousands of kids were not getting special education services because their parent or parents weren't available, like say they were on the streets living under a bridge, to sign the paperwork, to usher the services into the classroom. And so we said, hey, legislators, what if the foster parent or the agency could sign to get those services in place for these kids? Because kids in foster care have the worst educational outcomes of any group measured in the country, including homeless kids. And it was such a simple change but it needed to happen. It needed to be in a law, and so we fixed it. Another one that we just did is a really is quite profound, and we've done it in Arizona, Kansas. It's moving in Missouri, and it's continuing to roll out. These child protection agencies. Well, let me back up. Many of these children are entitled, just like other American children, to veterans, survivors benefits, or Social Security disability benefits. But the state agencies were taking those benefits from the children and then spending them for whatever the state's purposes were. And we argued that children have a property right to this money, right? Like children across the country do. These children are not different that way. And so Arizona became the first state to ban that practice. Now that money goes into an account for the child. And, so if you've got a kid who's 17 or 18 and the state has failed to find that child a family and they're facing homelessness at 18, now they might have a pot of money to help them along. Now, we want to help them long before they get to 18, right? We think there are enough families in America who can step up and step in that every child who needs a family should have one and can get one. But until we get there, this is really, really important. So these are the sorts of common sense reforms that we're going after, even as we seek these deeper, bigger constitutional, profound rights for children.
This is such a unifying topic too. Like we all should be in favor of everything that you're doing, right? Protecting children. And I know in this day and age and in this world, things can be so divisive, but it's like we all need to get on board and figure this out in our states, advocate, speak up, share what's going on, follow the work that you're doing. We all can do something. And it's only going to change if we use our voices and our stories. And I know that's what you're doing. And I can't wait to see where you go from here. How do you get connected to the kids that you guys work with?
Thank you so much. That's a great question. So word travels fast when there's a tremendous need like this. So everyone has called us, from judges themselves when they've seen a kid who needed to be represented. We've had calls from agency leaders, social workers, grandmothers who have watched their grandchildren be abused over and over and don't know what to do and can't afford an attorney. I mean, who has $50,000 just sitting around, right? I mean, this is, but you can see the abuse. We've rescued, we had one situation where a sister of someone who was trafficking her daughter for drugs, so the aunt of the victim came to us and said, "Oh my gosh, what do I do? She's 11. I know it's happening. She told me about it, and I watched as she became emaciated. My sister's been on drugs." And you can't just step in and take the kid. It's kidnapping, right? You have to do this legally and properly. And so we were like, "We've got this." And so at the end of the day, we ended up getting her safe, adopted to her sister. She changed her identification and all sorts of things to be safe. So that's just, those are just some of the types of kiddos that we're able to help. And there are so many ways people can get involved. I mean, with us, obviously we're a philanthropic organization, so we run on philanthropy, and we have people who do $20 a month. And I love that. Like, we're just part of their, that's kind of how I give, right? I can't give big, but I can do $20. I can do, a monthly gift. Come on, I go to Starbucks.
Yeah.
Okay, I've got that. So we've got that, so people who do that. And then we also, we've got people who, for instance, your friends who are attorneys, sometimes they can connect us to big law firms, and those big law firms might say, "You know what, we will take on some pro bono cases where we live," right? Or "We will connect you on this," or "We will help be," I think it's called pro hoc vice in a certain state. So they can be involved with us. And, any note that you send hello@thecenterforchildren.org with any kind of inquiry will be answered by someone. We're just, we're small enough and passionate enough that we will get to it. So also, people can foster. If you think taking on a kid who might leave might be too hard, or who might need to be adopted might be too hard, because you don't know, right? It's 50-50, they're staying forever, right? You just don't know. maybe you want to do respite care, right? Which is like weekend care. And the families who are fostering, boy, that break for 24 hours or 48 hours, it's huge. And the kids are usually so well behaved for a weekend, having fun with a new family. And so that's a possibility. And so there are just, I guess I would just say, figure out if you care about abused children and you want to help make these kids safe and loved, then find out what is best for you. What is the best contribution you can make? Is it to love one of them and bring them in? Is it to support an organization in the fight? Is it to take your legal skills? Or maybe you're a great writer and you want to write a little bit more on this. Maybe you're in journalism, or like you've got a podcast and you're like, you know what? Today I'm lifting up the voices of every abused child in this country, the ones locked in closets, the ones who are living in shelters. And I'm going to challenge my listeners to take one action to do something for these children. So I would just say, if these kids are on your heart, make a decision to do the one thing that you think is most valuable and just do it.
I often talk on this podcast about how we all have time, talent, and treasure, but it sort of ebbs and flows throughout life, right? Like you might not have $10 to donate to something, but you might be able to follow and share the things that the center is doing, or you might be able to get involved or offer your time. Like you said, respite care, that's a great thing to know about. Like there are so many different ways that we can all get involved and elevate this issue to talk about these children who are so often forgotten about. And I get it. Like in this day and age, we're all like running from one thing to another in our own lives that it's so easy just to kind of not even think about these forgotten about populations, whether it's children or abused children, or we've done some work on women who are incarcerated, on this podcast. And it's like, there are so many different people in our world that are forgotten about, and we need to shine a light on them and find ways that we can support them. And I think the work that you're doing is so incredible. And like you said, there are so many different ways that people can get involved. And I will be sure to put your websites, your social media, easy ways that people can get in touch with you and continue to follow the work that you're doing, but also support it, because I know people that are listening, they're going to want to support the work that you're doing. Looking for stories of women who are changing the world? The One Girl Revolution podcast is your go-to for inspiration and empowerment. Subscribe today on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts, and never miss an episode. Let's celebrate the power of women together. Darcy, I want to know, I know that there are so many stories, and you shared a little bit on this podcast, some stories, but is there a story that maybe just touched your heart in a special way or opened your eyes and you were like, this is why we do what we do every single day? Is there a story that you could share?
Yes, there are many, and as you can see, your listeners can't see my face, but my eyes well up when I go back through some of these stories. But I would say one of the most fulfilling was we had a little girl come to us, and she had been being molested nightly. It was actually by a relative in the home, and it had gone on for years. And it was discovered at the hospital. There was no question. The markings were on her body, and she was old enough to talk to us. And no one will ever be able to undo that trauma for her, right? That is something that she will live with for the rest of her life. But what we were able to do is the state inexplicably was trying to send her back to the partner of the abuser, claiming she'd be safe if the abuser were gone. And of course, the partner knew about it the entire time and was complicit in it. And this poor child, Kate, could not do a visitation, which the state forces you to do while you're in this interim period, without literally, she'd get to the door and she would wet herself. I mean, she was terrified of these people. So we took her case and we fought, and we had you talk about a one-woman revolution. We had a female attorney on that case, in part because it felt more comfortable for this female child. And we were able to get her away from this abusive situation, get her into a loving adoptive family. And on the day of the adoption, the judge asked her what name she wanted. Like many of these children will change their names because they associate their name with the abuse. And she said, I am going to choose the name Brittany, which was the name of her attorney. And she said, because without her, I wouldn't have my family and I wouldn't be safe today. And I told Brittany, our attorney, I was like, girl, you are like 28 years old and you can retire because you have just saved a child's life. That's how important this work is and how backwards so much of the law is at this time. It reminds me a lot about, our history when women couldn't vote, or, to vote in our country, you had to be a rich white man, it was like 5% of the population, and the civil rights movement, all these things we've overcome really to make good on that promise of equality and justice and liberty for all. And right now, these children are still second class under the law, and it needs to be fixed. And, together, children can't fight abuse, but together we can, and we will, and we are. So thank you, Kate, for raising their voices today.
Well, and like I said to you before we started recording, now you're a part of the sisterhood. You're a part of One Girl Revolution. And so I know that we're going to continue to find ways to collaborate. And I want to continue to support the great work that you're doing and just elevate the voices of these children, because it's so important for all of us to hear their voices. And I think about, I'm like getting choked up still thinking about the Brittany story. It's like so beautiful. But these children, it's like when you hear a baby cry, it's like, okay, somebody's got to like help the baby. Or you hear a kid cry, it's like, oh, what's wrong? Like, let me figure that out. And these are children that have been silenced by our system, by the systems in place, by our world so often, by their abusers. And so we need to find ways to elevate their voices. And I know that you're doing that every single day. And I am so honored to be a part of it in some small way. And I can't wait to continue to stay in touch with you. But where does the Center for the Rights of Abused Children go from here in your dream of dream worlds? This podcast is all about dreaming, Darcy. So I know there's so much work to be done, but where do you hope that you go from here?
Well, where we would like to go is to make sure that every child has a safe and loving home. And, what that looks like really is, first of all, making these children visible, because most people just are really unaware that this is a crisis and that outcomes for abused children haven't changed in 50 years in our country. So visibility is one. Number two is making sure there's a safe home for every child who enters the system the moment they enter, instead of shelters and jails and cars and these crazy places they put these precious kids. And then, of course, making sure their constitutional rights under the law are protected. They too have the right to be safe in their bodies. And you can do things right now to your own child, that you couldn't do to a stranger on the street. And that's just wrong. They have their little bodies. And, as parents, we have rights, but we also have responsibilities. Those responsibilities are sacred, and they include protecting the life and safety of our children. And if we abuse that as parents, then to me, we're really terminating our own rights to the child, right? And so we just want to see a day when most of these kids go in the system because of drug use. So we need to get after that. But short of that, when a child is in danger, when a child needs a home, we need to be there like the best ER triage you've ever seen, protected, saved, and they go on to have a great and amazing life. And that's it. It's just so simple. Every child deserves a safe and loving home, and we need to put the laws in place and the infrastructure to get them there. And Kate, we're going to do it.
We are going to do it, but it takes each and every one of us. And even people, I don't have any children yet, but it's like, even all of us as adults, we have a responsibility, not only for our own children, but also to advocate and speak up and be a voice for the children of our world, And so I think it's so important for every single person that's listening. We can all do something. We've talked about multiple ways that people can get involved, and I hope that they do. I will put your website, your social media, all the different ways that people can get involved in your work, how they can find you, how they can support the great work that you're doing. But before I let you go, Darcy, I have two final questions, two questions that I always end this podcast on. So I'd like to ask you, you are a one girl revolution, and I know that you're also surrounded by one girl revolutions, but if you could highlight one woman, one world changing woman or girl, a one girl revolution in your own life, who would it be?
So in my own life, I would pick my 13-year-old daughter. Her name is Ophelia, and she's the first one I fostered, and she needed forever. And when you come through drug exposure, it presents very unique and very difficult challenges. And I am telling you that girl has worked every day. She came out a fighter, and she is still fighting. And today, she will take the stage to fight for other children. She is the first one to stop a bully. She is the first one when I am sick to come into my room and say, "Here's a thermal thing, Mom." And what it shows is that she is, despite the obstacles and the heartache that she has, why was I left behind? Questions like that are natural. She is showing me that you can choose to focus on the light. And I think it's incredible. And she's not the only woman in the world, but in my world, every day I see her when she is at her best, and I just think that is a girl who is making choices to see the light and be the light. So I will nominate my daughter, Ophelia.
Well, Ophelia is a one girl revolution, and I know she is changing the world every single day. And I can't wait to see where she goes from here. Like, that's the exciting thing, is all of us, we're constantly writing our story, right? And we're becoming who we were created to be. We were created for a purpose. I talk often about how we are as unique as our fingerprint, and we're the only person that can leave that imprint on our world. And so I can't wait to see where Ophelia goes from here, and the imprint that she's already leaving on the world, but she has so much more to come. And I can't wait to see where her sweet life goes from here. But Darcy, I always end this podcast on one question. So I'd like to ask you, if you could leave women and girls around the world with one message, what would it be?
I love this question. So my grandmother, who has passed on, used to send me old school newspaper clippings. And when I lived abroad, I had one on my mirror, and I kept it there all year. And it said, the woods would be very quiet if only the birds who sang the best sang. And what I took from that is, you are special and you are needed. Whatever your voice, whatever your age, whatever you feel like your brokenness is, the woods would not be the same without you. So raise that voice and you be you, because you are unique and perfect the way you are, and part of this great symphony of life.
Well, Darcy, you are such an example of that. Thank you so much for all the incredible work that you do. And thank you so much for being on the One Girl Revolution podcast.
Thank you so much for having me on, Kate.
For more from One Girl Revolution, to listen to all of our podcast episodes, watch our Emmy-nominated documentary series, follow us on social media, donate to our nonprofit organization, and more, please visit onegirlrevolution.com. That's the number onegirlrevolution.com.